Good day everyone, I am Kalamachi Igalope and I am here to represent about the theories of crime causation. So first is classical theories of crime causation. Classical theories of crime causation hold primarily that the people's decision to commit crime is a matter of choice because it was assumed that people had free will to choose. Utilitarian philosophers Cesare Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham argue that people with the benefits on consequences of their future actions before deciding on a course of behavior. So next is rational choice theory. Rational choice theory holds that person will engage in criminal behavior after weighing the consequences and benefits of action. It states that people are rational who make calculated choices regarding what are they going to do before they act to commit crime. Offenders know how to weigh the benefits or consequences if they decide to commit, so that persons must decide whether to commit or who is the person to target and how to execute it. So, pinag-isipan muna ng mabuti yan bago gawin. That's what we call rational theory. This method was designed by Cornish and Clark to assist in thinking about situational crime prevention. So, next is routine activity theory. Routine activity theory from Cohen and Felson emphasized that crime occurs when three elements converge. First is a motivated offender, the second is a suitable target, and next is the absence of a capable guardian. This theory includes that routine activities of both offender and victim. So next is lifestyle theory. The main concept of lifestyle theory is that people may become crime victims because their lifestyle increases their exposure to criminal offenders. This was developed by Michael Goffrenson, Michael Hendelag, and James Garofalo. So, example, there is a young student who always return home from class at night every 11 o'clock in the evening, and she could be a victim of rape or robbery as a result of her carelessness. So next is general deterrence and specific deterrence theory. It says that punishment can prevent people in society from committing crimes. In general, tumutukoy sa lahat ng tao. So, for example, when a person is punished in front of the public, such as by being hanged, it serves as a reminder that whoever committed the crime may face the same punishment. People should be discouraged from committing crimes. So, next is a specific deterrence theory. It says that punishment can prevent to a person from committing a crime. The specific is tumutukoy sa isang tao lang. For example, when a person commits a crime is imprisoned, it is believed that the experience of how difficult life is in prison will serve as a lesson for him not to commit the crime again. So, next is victim precipitation theory. So, it view that some people may actually initiate the confrontation that eventually leads to their injury or death. This presented by Hans von Hentig and applies only to violent victims. So, example is due to a husband continual fighting alcoholism and abuse of his wife, the wife can commit a crime against her husband. Next is incapacitation theory. It stands or to reason that if more criminals are criminals are sent to prison or keeping no criminals out of circulation, the crime rate should go down. This theory focuses on removing the ability of the offender to commit future crimes. So the next is psychological theories of crime causation. Psychological theories express that criminal behavior was the product of unconscious forces operating within a person's mind. So next is psychodynamic theory and psychosexual stages of human development. Psychodynamic or psychoanalytic psychology. It is one of permitted theories in psychology. This theory holds that the human personality is controlled by unconscious mental processes developed in every childhood. It contains three major components, namely id-ego and superego. This was proposed by Viennese psychiatrist Sigmund Freud. For example, may isang tao na pumasok sa loob ng restaurant at may nakita siyang may alahas sa loob ng bag na naghahalaga ng kalahating milyon. Dahil sa halagang to, naisipan niyang itago na lang kaysa isauli sapagkat nasisilaw siya sa pira at halaga nito. So, next is behavioral theory. This learning theory states that behaviors are learned from the environment, that human actions are developed through learning experience, and that behavior is learned when it is rewarded and extinguished by negative reactions or punishment. This theory was created by John Watson and popularized by Burroughs Friedrich Skinner. So, next is social learning theory. It says that people are not actually born with the ability to act violently, but that they learn to be aggressive through their life experience. So, for example, sa palaging pananampal ng ama ng batang tuwing lasing ay pwede ng batang itong gayahin hanggang sa kaniyang paglaki. So, next is cognitive theory. Cognitive learning theory explains how we process information when we learn. It has 4 stages, namely the sensory motor, pure operational, concrete operational, and formal operations. So next is moral development theory. It focuses on how children develop morality and moral reasoning. Kohlberg's theory suggests that moral development occurs in a series of 6 stages. So next is intergenerational transmission theory. It refers to the transfer of economic or social status across generations. These cross-generational transfers occur through a variety of means, including the inheritance of occupational status, educational attainment, earnings, and wealth. So, for example, parents' schooling choices may directly impact their children's decision to stay in school. So, it both casual and casual challenge. So, next is alternative theory. A set of statements of principle device to explain a group of facts or phenomena, especially or that has been repeatedly tested or widely accepted and can be used to make predictions about natural phenomena. So, for example, the alternative theory that the brain is left unchanged after a night's sleep is unacceptable on its face. For its part, the defense may but is not obliged to present an alternative theory of the events associated with the crime. So next is differential association and reinforcement theory. In Ernest W. Borges and Roland combined social theory and Sutherland theory of differential association to produce the theory of differential reinforcement. So next is async conditioning theory. Async theory agrees strongly that biological predispositions towards certain personality traits combined with conditioning and socialization during childhood in order to create our personality. These interactions approach may therefore be much more valid than either or biological or environment theory alone. So next is integrated theory. Integrated theory are theories that combine the concepts and central propositions from two or more prior existing theories into a new single set of integrated concepts and propositions. According to Lilly, Collin, and Ball, in review of theory integration, it is considered important for the future or criminology because it merged the insights from two or more theories into a single framework to introductions, reasoning, or cause for crimes that are being committed. The best example of this type of integration is Eliot integrated theory, in which strain leads to weak conventional bonds to society, which in turn leads to associations with deviant peer groups and those deviants. Next is maternal deprivation and attachment theory. Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis suggests that continual disruption of the attachment between infant and primary caregiver could result in long-term cognitive, social, and emotional difficulties for that infant. So, Bowlby originally believed the effects to be permanent and irreversible. For example, is someone who is secure may move through the stage fairly quickly or skip some altogether, while someone who is anxious or avoidant may get stuck on one of the stage. So next is sociological theories of crime causation. A. Social disorganization theory. Social disorganization is a theoretical perspective that explains ecological differences in levels of crime based on structural and cultural factors shaping the nature of the social order across communities. In the 1942, two criminology researchers from the Chicago School of Criminology, Clifford Shaw and Henry Mackay, developed social disorganization theory through their research. Social disorganization theory is widely used as an important predictor of youth violence and crime. So, for example, a tenant in a public housing unit may live three may live there for years and never from a relationship with his or her neighbors. Residents who do not know the children of the area were less likely to intervene when the children display unacceptable behavior. So next is concentric zone theory. The theory posits concentric zones around the central area defined by their residential composition, moving from the very poor and socially deviant in the inner zone of transition to a peripheral suburban commuter ring. The concentric zone model or Burgess model is a model to explain how to settlement as such as a city will grow. It was developed by Ernest Burgess between 1925 and 1929. The model was the first to explain why certain groups of people live in certain areas of the city. So, next is anomy theory. The idea of anomy means the lack of normal ethical or social standards. In criminology, the idea of anomy is that the person chooses criminal activity because the individual believes that there is no reason not to. Originating in the traditional of classical sociology, Durkheim Merton anomy theory posits how broad social conditions influence deviant behavior and crime. On the one hand, the theory has shaped studies of crime rates across large social units such as countries and metropolitan areas. For example, if society does not provide enough jobs that pay a living wage so that people can work to survive, many will turn to criminal methods of earning a living. For Merton, deviance and crime are in large part a result of anomy, a state of social disorder. So next is D. Strain theory. In sociology and criminology, strain theory states that social structures within society may pressure citizens to commit crime. A proposal that pressure derived from social factors such as lack of income or lack of quality education drives individuals to commit crime. For example, people who use illegal drugs to make themselves feel better, or a student assaulting his peers to end the harassment they cause. So next is relative deprivation theory. It is the lack of resources to sustain the diet, lifestyles, activities, and that an individual or group and accustomed or that are widely encouraged or approved in the society to which they belong, to explain the fact that persons who could be much worse or off than they are but still feel deprived, and comparison with even more fortunate groups often play a prominent part in social movements. This idea was coined by sociologist Samuel Stoffer. Next is general strain theory. It is a theory of criminology developed by Robert Agnew. It gained a significant amount of academic attention since being developed in 1992. According to Robert, in general strain theory, is based on three different factors. Number one is failure to achieve a goal. Second is the existing of harmful impulse. The last is the removal of positive impulse. So the example of this is the people who use illegal drugs to make themselves feel better, or a student assaulting his peers to end harassment they cause. Um, Next is cultural deviance theory. Um, it suggests that conformity to prevailing cultural norms or lower class society causes crime. Researchers Clifford Shaw and Henry Mackay studied crime patterns in Chicago in the early of 1990s. So it suggests that conformity to prevailing cultural norms of lower class society causes crime. The mix of cultures and values created a smaller society with different ideas of deviance, and those values and ideas were transferred from generation to generation. So next is delinquent subculture theory. In this term, criminal or delinquent subcultures denotes system of norms, values, or interests that supports criminal or delinquent behavior. According to Cohen, the union of young people into subcultures is the result of adjustment and status problems of their members caused by the inequality of the existing class society. So next is differential opportunity theory. A theory of delinquency and delinquent subcultures developed by Richard and Lloyd, which is the idea that people, usually teens from low socioeconomic backgrounds who have few opportunities for successful, use any means at their disposal to achieve success. For example, the presence of an alarm system prevents the opportunity to commit a crime. Next is drift theory. It recognizes that juvenile delinquents hold conventional values and attitudes. They are aware that their delinquent actions are viewed by society as deviant. Mazda 1964 further develops neutraliz- neutralization theory, or incorporating it into the concept of drift, which is the idea that adolescents become delinquent because the weakening of controls allows them to drift between delinquent and conventional behaviors. So, next is differential association theory. In criminology, differential association is a theory developed by Edwin Sutherland, proposing that through interaction with others, individuals learn the values, attitudes, techniques, and motives for criminal behavior. It is a person will be delinquent if there are prior attitudes that favor violations of the law, as opposed to attitudes that negatively evaluate violations of the law. For example, if one exposed to a repeated criminal scenario, this scenario will eventually rub off on others nearby. The differential association theory can differ in frequency, duration, priority, and intensity. Next is containment theory. It is a form of control theory proposed by Walter Reckless in the 1940s to 1960s. The theory contends that a series of external social factors and internal qualities effectively insulate certain individuals from criminal involvement, even when ecological variables induce others to engage in a crime. For example, is an example of a push into delinquency or crime might be a low level or frustration tolerance, revolutionists, the need of gratification, as well as wants and needs. Next is social band theory. The social band theory was created by Travis. It is it is a control theory built upon the assumption that people are inherently self-interested. Therefore, it seeks to explain why some people refrain from crime rather than engage in crime. For example, because people have formed many relationships with family members and peers over the course of their lives and have unofficially accepted the social conditions and expectations that come with being part of a society. They are unlikely to commit crimes against another person. So next is social reaction and labeling theory. The idea of labeling theory flourishes in American sociology during the 1960s. So, thanks in large part to sociologist Howard Baker. Social reaction theory or labeling theory focuses on the linguistic tendency of majority group to negatively label minority, and suppressing the deviance is important to social solidarity. For example, a person who volunteers to stay late at work is usually seen as worthy of praise. But if a person has been labeled as a thief, people might be suspicious that they will steal something. For some people, once deviant label has been applied, this can actually lead to more deviance. So next is primary and secondary deviance. Limits concepts of primary and secondary deviance draw from George Herbert perspectives on social interaction from labeling theory, the genesis of which is usually attributed to Frank Tannenbaum in his 1938 Crime and Community. Secondary deviance is deviant behavior that results from being labeled as a deviant by society. This is different from primary deviance, which is deviant behavior that does not have long-term consequences and does not result in the person committing the act of being labeled as a deviant. So, for example, if a gang engage in primary deviant behaviors such as acts of violence, dishonesty, or drug addiction, to legally deviant or criminal behavior such as murder, this would be the stage of secondary deviance. Limert made another distinction between primary deviance and secondary deviance. So, next is economic theories of crime causation. It is a standard of model of decision making where individuals choose between criminal activity and legal activity on the basis of the expected utility from those acts. So first is economic model of criminal behavior. Basic model. The economic theory of criminal behavior is an application of the neoclassical theory of demand, formalized by Nobel laureate Gary Baker in 1968. It states that potential criminals are economically rational and respond significantly to the deterring incentives by the criminal justice system. So next is Karl Marx theory. Um, Marxism is a social, political, and economic theory originated by Karl Marx, which focuses on the struggle between capitalist and the working class. He believed that this conflict would um, ultimately lead to a revolution in which the working class would overthrow the capitalist class and seize control of the economy. For example, conflict theory can be used to look at wars, violence, revolutions, and forms of injustice and discrimination by explaining that there is a natural disparity in society that causes these problems. So, next is Friedrich Engels and Wilhelm Bunger's theory. At an early age, Engels developed a profound sense of cynicism toward major societal institutions like religion. He was opposed to organized religion and capitalism, much of which was influenced by the writings of German philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel and Willem Bunger, a Dutch sociologist, took a different approach and argued that crime was caused by societal factors, specifically the economy and its effects on people. Only a small proportion of the site authors argue that there is no relationship between crime and economic conditions. So next is psychosocial theories of crime causation. It is a multidisciplinary perspective that attempts to understand criminal behavior and related outcomes like antisocial behavior and its consequences, by considering the interactions between biological, genetics, hormones, psychology, brain structure, and functioning. Next is psychosocial module of crime causation. This theory examines aspects of biology that influence health. This might include like brain changes, genetics, or functioning of major body organs such as the liver, kidneys, or even motor system. Next is moral insanity and criminal responsibility. Asa Acrel 1807 to 1881, he defended the moral concept of moral insanity, a disorder first described in 1906 by the French humanitarian and psychiatrist Philippine Pinel 1745 to 1826. Moral insanity was a term used to describe persons who were normal in all aspects except that something wrong with the part of the brain that regulates affective responses. So next is premenstrual syndrome. It refers to onset of the menstrual cycle that triggers excessive amounts of the female sex or hormones which affect antisocial and aggressive behavior. Katrina Dorothea Dalton War Studies of English Women indicated that these females are more likely to commit suicide and be aggressive and otherwise in the commission of suicide than that person who assisted is liable of giving assistance to commit suicide. So next is battered child syndrome. Battered child syndrome is a medical diagnosis based on evidence indicating that the child has been subjected to a pattern of serious and unexplained abuse. It was coined by Dr. Henry Kempe and his colleagues in a landmark article, The Battered Child Syndrome, published in 1962. So, next is postpart postpartum stress syndrome and postpartum psychosis. Michael Finkelstein postpartum stress syndrome causes feelings of anxiety and self-doubt. The woman wants to become a perfect mother and wife, but at the same time, she feels exhausted and overwhelmed. Postpartum psychosis is caused by multiple factors is uncommon with only one in 1,000 women uh, were looping within a few days after childbirth. It can dramatically affect anyone involved. So next is political and social conflict theories of crime causation. An alternative conception of political theories of crime causation is that they are characterized by their emphasis on social conflict and power relationships, insofar as the criminal justice system is seen as an instrument of political control or repression. The politicization of all crime is implied. George Vold was the one who adopted the conflict theory in criminology. So next is Marxist criminology. Marxist criminology says during the struggle for resources in capitalism, crime emerged as those on the bottom contend for social, political, and economic equality. For example, Mayor Marge was attempting to break into the local power structure, so she was charged for promising a position in her government. Next is conflict theory. Conflict theory holds that different groups within a society are perpetually competing for limited resources and power, resulting in the powerful dominating the powerless. Uh, for example, conflict theory describes the relationship between employers and employees as one of conflict, in which the employees wish to pay as a little as possible for the employees' labor, while the employees wish to maximize their wages. Next is social reality of crime. It describes the theory of the social reality of crime, which involves factors that compose crime's social reality, including the application of criminal law, the behavior patterns to those who are defined as criminal, and the construction of an ideology of crime. For example, he concluded that public conceptions of crime are constructed in the political area to serve political purposes. Next is left realism. It believed that living in a capitalistic society as in a society where private entities control trade and industry instead of the state is the main cause for crime. It claims that these two theories are too idealistic and have unrealistic ideas about how to solve a crime. So, for example, people who are excluded from being consumers in a capitalist society sometimes revert to criminal actions according to left realist. Next is postmodern theory. It is a way of thinking about culture, philosophy, art, and many other things. It says that there is no real truth. It says that knowledge is always made or invented and not discovered. Postmodern theory is largely a reaction to the assumed certainty of scientific or objective efforts to explain reality. In the postmodern understanding, interpretations is everything. Reality only comes into being truth. Our interpret uh, interpretations of what the world means to us individually. Um, for example, the clearest example would be the death bunny scene where a rabbit slaughters women. Intentionally or not, these works of art belong on the postmodern film list because they are subverted expectations and gave audience something that they couldn't have anticipated long before it that was more in vigo. Next is institutive and constitutive theory. It states it states that recognition of an entity as a state is not automatic. A state is only a state when it is recognized, such as another states have an considerable discretion to recognize or not. Moreover, only upon recognition by those other states does the new state exist, at least in a legal sense. For example, England and Finland were recognized by the instrumentality of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was divided into two parts after the World War II by a treaty. Korea was divided into two parts. So next is conservatism and liberalism theory. This too is a politically ideology combining conservative policies with liberal stances, especially on economic issues but also on social matters, representing a brand of political conservatism strongly influenced by liberalism. Next is radicalism, the political orientation of those who favor revolutionary change in government and society. Next is identity fusion theory. It poses that strongly fused individuals feel kin-like bonds with other group members, even ones with whom I may have a little or no contact identity. Fusion was Identity fusion theory was created by William Swan and Michael Brewster. And that would be all. Thank you.